Hey everyone, Focal Rhythms here. This is my list of top 10 albums to come out in 2018. There were a lot of great albums that came out last year, but I thought it would be fun to try to cut it down to just 10. So, nothing to take anything away from any of those albums, but here's my list. Number 10 on my list, I have the Alien Boy EP by Oliver Tree. Oliver Tree is a pretty refreshing mix of indie pop, hip hop, and dance music. He kind of looks and sounds like somebody that got clowned on in the 90s, then came out with a hot ass mixtape to get back at him. The title track for this album is really spacey and funky, and then follows with All I've Got, which is a pretty cool mix of acoustic guitar and electronic dance. Number 9 on my list, I have SMOTE Reverser by The OCs. California garage rock veteran John Dwyer returns with another project under The OCs. While not always confined to one specific genre that they lean to, and they usually experiment a little bit from one album to the next, it's always pretty epic and somewhat psychedelic. SMOTE Reverser is pretty thematic. The lyrics, guitar riffs, and album art paint it out to be this sort of tripped out medieval fantasy. This album at times reminded me of their previous album Orc, which sounded like they were having a long jam session. Very improvised and not specifically written for the album, but worked well and helped to take away a level of predictability that can sometimes make listening to music a little boring. There are plenty of melodic parts that make it sound more accessible, but songs like Overthrown are noisy and chaotic, which Coach Whip's fans would appreciate. SMOTE Reverser and their previous album Orc sound like they could be two installments in a series. I'm not sure if they did that on purpose, but I'd be interested to see what they do with their next album and if it kind of continues that on. Number 8 on my list, I have Swimming by Mac Miller. I had never really gone out of my way to listen to Mac Miller, but a lot of the people I work with were listening to it, and I had heard about half of the songs just in passing. There were a couple tracks that I vibed with right away, and when listening to the whole album, I wasn't disappointed. I love how the bass rides throughout the song Hurt Feelings, and the flow made me want to listen to it over and over again until the point where I could kind of sing along with it. It follows with this funky track called What's the Use that has a strong and catchy flow to it. I liked the sentimental piano and overall feeling on 2009. There's a nice range of tone and sound throughout the whole album. Number 7 on the list is Forever and Ever by Sales. With a string of singles leading up to their first LP, Sales had me hooked with their very breathy but well-sung pop songs. I describe them as sweet riffs and pretty vocals exaggerated by a lack of fill. With plenty of songs sounding personal, some are a bit more dancey, but all with a pretty dreamy sound to them. I'm sure anyone who enjoyed their first LP would be more than happy with Forever and Ever. Number 6 on my list, I have Melancholy Behind Glass by Kool AD. Just 20 minutes long, this seems like more of an EP than a full album, but with what looks like 7 projects in 2018 alone, you can't really hold it against him. Kool AD is a former member of the hip-hop trio Das Racist. I never thought to check out if any of the members had any solo work, but after a few of his songs were popping up here and there on my radar, I decided to look into him. Kool AD brings some underground flows, but with a more accessible delivery and sound to them. He has rhymes that critique American society and seem pretty self-aware, but also has more kickback rhymes on here. Half the time he does sound like he's freestyling, but really going off, so I'm into it. Number 5 on my list, I have Role Model by Michael Christmas. With his third album, Michael Christmas brings everything I would want from him without sacrificing anything I would come to love him for. Rhymes that are more revealing and personal than a lot of mainstream rappers, but with a strong and accessible flow that most people could get in on. There's usually something relatable in his songs and has a sense of humor mixed in. I loved how the intro referenced one of my favorite Cousin Sis songs, and it was cool to see him featured on the album. A lot of really contagious hooks on this album. Really love the song Honeyberry, just like really fun. The song I'm Not the Only One, about just kind of fucking up over and over again, was pretty great, and I love the music video for that one too. Now that I think about it, I actually really love every music video by Michael Christmas. Again, great sense of humor. They always tie in really well with the songs. The sound and vibe I get from Michael Christmas is kind of like if you had a good friend that got in the rap game, but you're still tight and it's all love. Damn, you're doing good, man. Happy for you. Proud of you, dog. Number 4 on my list, I have Veteran by JPEGMAFIA. While his previous work was interesting and I could appreciate the sound experimentation he was doing, it just didn't really appeal to me that much from the sound of it. However, this last album from Peggy had a combination of so many things that I would want to hear that would make me want to go back to a project and listen to it all over again. He was able to be dark, humorous, and highly experimental. He pulls no punches, going off on everyone across the spectrum, and while having a really good sense of humor to it, most lines could turn some innocent bystanders off. It's kind of hard to pin down his style, but it's definitely unique to him, and I hope to see it live in person sometime, because the energy that he puts into his recordings must be even more intense in person. At number 3 on my list, I have Taboo by Denzel Curry. Although enjoying Curry's features on other artists that I listen to, I hadn't gone out of my way to listen to one of his albums before this one, and I was really pleasantly surprised. I wasn't ready for how much I would love this album. It starts off with the title track sounding very soulful and dreamy, singing about having permanent scars and warning about the choices that you make in your path of life. He sings on this track of loving somebody named Taboo, how they were molested at a very young age and willing to do anything for them. Taking on this subject matter on the opening track of your album couldn't have been easy, but it sounds really sincere. Black Balloons was a really smooth track featuring Goldlink, and I really loved both of their flows and lyrics on this cut. I love the beat for the song Cash Maniac with a very 80s sounding funk synth in the background. It's one of the few, if not only, feel-good tracks on the album and has a really contagious vibe. It just makes you feel like you have as much cash as Denzel Curry does on it. The song Sumo is a ridiculous trap banger. It comes in really hard with a fat distorted bass and is just full of quotable one-liners. Curry's vocals sound strained on half the bars and really just helps the feeling of it going off. Super Saiyan is another one of my favorites off of the album. The bass is sinister, the beat is hard, and his flow is just really on point. Mixed with the yelling in the background, it actually sounds like he's going Super Saiyan. The song Switch It Up has this extravagant and villainous sound to it, which I thought Curry matched up with perfectly, especially his voice on the first verse. The song Sirens was a socially aware cut, which I appreciated. It features Jid, and I really loved both of their lyrics on it. I loved everything about the track Clout Cobain. The title was pretty clever, the beat is eerie, and the message is pretty strong. The Blackest Balloon was another eerie and dark sounding track. Reference in the chorus saying it feels like a horror movie, and he hears his late brother calling to him. The track Perks has a mean and intense sound to it, instrumentally and vocally. It's an anthem about how Denzel Curry doesn't do pills despite it being an increasing trend in the rap scene. And although I think that's an increasing trend of the population as a whole, the rap scene is just sort of a reflection of that. That's besides the point. Vengeance is a pretty violent track, and although I wish it was a little bit longer, I did appreciate JPEGMAFIA's feature on it, and the video definitely is fun. You could tell they had a lot of fun making it, and it's fun to watch. When reading about this album, I learned that conceptually it is split into a light, gray, and dark part of the album. And although I don't feel like it splits exactly where it says it's supposed to, there's definitely a good range of emotion on there. Top 2 albums for 2018. What do you think it is? Number 2, we have Wide Awake by Parquet Courts. Parquet Courts have always earned a place in a playlist of mine while sounding punk but not being afraid to experiment. With their latest album, they are continuing to extend their range of sound, to expand their range of sound. I later learned that Danger Mouse helped produce this album, and this is definitely one of his strong collaborations. I would put it up there with how much I enjoyed his collaboration with James Mercer on Broken Bells projects. I was sort of caught off guard with the heavy subjects they decided to take on with this. This album starts really strong with Total Football, being surprisingly more smart about taking on political and social commentary than I think any other songs that I've heard before that try to do that, at least in this genre. Singing about the majority class, working class, and new generations pushing out the old. Generations of oppressive societal structures and institutions being left behind in the backing chorus. I thought the lyrics all the way through were very on point and compelling, and I really loved the line of the outro, collectivism and autonomy are not mutually exclusive. And I would 100% agree with that. I believe it's just a narrative pushed onto people to stop them from coming together to actually change anything. Going into the next track, the pace switches slightly, but the energy is definitely maintained. It's a frustration of the violence that's so recurrent that it's become a part of our everyday lives. It goes on this rampage of poetic lyrics and expresses how necessary it is for us to realize how we all contribute to violence in some way if we want to actually change anything. I thought Adam Savage played off of his name for the second part of this song in a really fitting way. I love the line in the song about how riot is a word used to delegitimize your unrest and to make your resistance into an overreaction. The song takes a surprising turn as it travels off with a psychedelic sounding organ, which sounds pretty rad. With the funky bass line and the sweet appearance of an omnichord, the sound calms down a bit, but without sacrificing the importance of the lyrics. Before the Water Gets Too High is an ominous groove about the importance of climate change. And I know what some of you are thinking. No. I don't want to listen to some bullshit hippie music about climate change, but just give this song a chance. It's actually really good. Almost Had to Start a Fight and In and Out of Patience is a double feature song that has some really frantic riffs in it. And I enjoyed the internal dialogue of somebody trying to process the thoughts and emotions that would lead them to actually starting a fight with somebody. The self-evaluation of when does something stop being a joke. I love the lines, what if I got tired of being polite, and reasons eclipsed by tension. The switch up to the second part of this song is really great, and I thought it transitioned really well. The lyrics about all of these things adding up and taking your patience until the only thing you've got left is this shit attitude. The song Normalization is high energy, has this funky bass line in the middle, and some experimental space sounds sprinkled in there. The title track, Wide Awake, is pretty on the nose about being woke, but is really fun and helps round out the album's range of sound. I can't recommend this album enough. It's one of my favorites, not even of just last year. And finally, number 1 on my list. Who is it? Who's he got? Who's number 1? Who is it, man? Well, I guess you already know if you read the description. No surprise. Number 1 on my list for 2018 is Some Rap Songs by Earl Sweatshirt. With 3 years since his last album, Earl Sweatshirt fans have been eagerly awaiting his next project. While this album does continue Earl's combination of braggadocious rhymes with those revealing his internal struggles, this project seems like it definitely dives a lot deeper into his psyche with the lyrics and the instrumentals used. I was amazed at how full this project feels with a runtime of only 24 minutes. There is just such a huge range of emotion. There's so many feelings packed throughout each song. And with the title of it being Some Rap Songs, it could easily dissuade anybody from giving it a chance and listening to it, thinking that it's anything more than that, but it is much more. Shattered Dreams starts the album off with a pretty mellow beat and a soulful sounding sample singing Dreams over and over in the background. The line "back off, standoffish and anemic" is pretty blunt about social anxiety. You get the feeling that he's having these realizations that he's stuck in a bad trip. The lines in the chorus seem like metaphors for coming of age and having these realizations that we find ourselves in compromising situations because we feel like we have no other options. The track Red Water is a quick repeat of these 8 bars that vaguely reference Earl's father, and sounds like he's stuck in this moment of time trying to work through something or convince himself of something. The track Nowhere to Go was the first single to tease this album and alludes to some of the hard times that Earl's been going through. There's a lot of experimental sounds and noises on this cut, which I'm sure are inspired by Flying Lotus in some way. December 24th had some pretty dark bars showing that his grandmother's death is still on his mind, and combine that with his father's recent passing definitely adds to the struggle. He tells of lacking the strength at the time to deal with this and excessive drinking. The Mint was the next single leading up to this album, featuring Navy Blue, who I hadn't heard of before, but I really enjoyed his flow and lyrics on this track. I loved the intro to this track, sounding like it was a sample from a blaxploitation movie, the sentimental keys throughout it, and just the overall flow and lyrics. Every bar was really solid on it. The instrumentals on this and the next track sounded reminiscent of Mad Villainy, which Madlib and MF Doom fans would definitely appreciate. The song Lucy has this nightmarish beat, and there's a bipolar contrast between that and the soaring and uplifting instrumental on the next track. Eclipse was another cut sounding like it was influenced by Mad Villain. He acknowledges his recent absence on the song Veins and openly has thoughts that conflict with his lines of self-praise. The track Playing Possum has this beautiful and grand instrumental, and in place of Earl are his mother speaking and his father reciting a poem of his own. His feelings of anguish and depression seem to reach their depths on the song Peanut, with lines like his family seeing him on stage and not being impressed with his performance. Experiences like this would be hard for anyone, especially considering his father was a highly regarded poet, political activist, and influential member of the African National Congress. And with lines like "flushing through the pain, depression, this is not a phase," the knowledge that these thoughts and state of mind cannot be permanently resolved is really unsettling. The experimental noises on this track sound haunting and add to the overall tormented feeling. The closing track, Riot, is a nice sounding instrumental that samples the song from the same title by famous South African jazz artist Hugh Masekela, which was a close friend to Earl's father. So that was my list of my top 10 favorite albums to come out last year. If you've listened to any of these albums, let me know what you thought about them. I'd be interested to read your opinions and maybe throw your own list of your top 10 favorite from last year. Make sure to hit the like button on this video if you enjoyed it at all. I would really appreciate it. And hit the subscribe if you'd be interested on seeing another kind of review format type of video. The song... What the fuck is this song called? The song Normalization has this funky bass line. God damn it. Good job. Proud of you, man. Good job. You're doing good.